What is up, everyone? My name will be Josh. This is StrainCentral, and today we are going to be talking about CBD. So I know it's 2021, and we're kind of moving on to like different isolated cannabinoids. Not a lot of people are actually talking about cannabidiol or CBD, and I kind of feel like it's time for us to get back to basics. I'm going to break down CBD and kind of talk about the difference between snake oil CBD and viable, beneficial supplemental CBD. So we're going to kind of break down CBD as a whole. Like I said, CBD is simply cannabidiol. And yes, CBD is one of the most found active cannabinoids in marijuana. So THC is obviously our most common cannabinoid. It's our most found cannabinoid in marijuana. CBD is right behind it. But the CBD that we're talking about today is CBD that's extracted from hemp. So this is legal CBD. A lot of different states have different laws regarding it, but this is federally legal CBD, cannabidiol, which is extracted from hemp. So the next thing we're going to cover is the benefits of CBD. There's a lot of research regarding CBD, and if you go into your average grocery store, you go into Target, you go into Walgreens, even Walmart nowadays, you can go into the health section, into the supplement section, and find CBD most of the time. This is CBD that's mostly in doses of 2, 3, 5, maybe at the most 10 milligrams of CBD. And the issue with that is it's essentially snake oil. If you look into PubMed research, if you look into research that's been done regarding CBD, most of these studies aren't going to be 5 milligram studies, 10 milligram studies, even most of the time 20 milligram studies. Most of these studies actually start at usually around 25 to 200 milligrams of CBD. If you're looking for more therapeutic doses, they even go upwards of 800 to 1,000 milligrams of CBD sometimes. So when you go to a grocery store and you find these 2, 5, 10 milligram gummies, they're not really going to be giving you an effective dose of CBD. A lot of the times the gummies that you get from Walmart are going to be more of a placebo dose than an actual effective dose. Alright, Josh in the future here, I have to jump in with a really quick editing note. So for newer consumers, I definitely don't suggest just jumping into super large doses. For a newer consumer, someone who's either consumed small amounts of CBD or never consumed it before, start with something small. Start with a 15, 25 milligram dose of CBD and work your way up from there. Maybe start with a half a gummy, wait a couple of hours, you can dose up from there, but it's kind of hard to dose down once you've overdosed your dose. So start with small doses, work your way up. That's all I wanted to say. Back to the video. So from my personal experience, I find that I start to even notice the effect, even start to feel the dose of CBD around 100 milligrams. 150 milligrams is when I really start to actually get like a noticeable calming effect. But my personal preferred dose of CBD is probably anywhere between 200 to 500 milligrams. If I'm looking to go to bed, I'm going to take something upwards of 400 or 500. If I'm looking for more of like a calming dose, I'm going to take, between 150 and 200 milligrams. I'm also not actually smoking in this video, hopefully just to have a video actually be an educational video that doesn't get 18 plus, and this actually will have some kind of reach and help people become somewhat educated on CBD. But the next thing we're going to be covering is kind of the different forms of CBD out there. So there's full spectrum, there's broad spectrum, and there's CBD isolate. So starting with full spectrum, all full spectrum means is raw, unfiltered, unprocessed hemp extract. Extract from a hemp plant. And this is something that contains all of your necessary phytochemicals, terpenes, and kind of a full spectrum of cannabinoids. So this is your full spectrum of everything. And with all those things, phytochemicals, terpenes, and cannabinoids, they work together synergistically to create the Entourage Effects, which is something that I talk about all the time. It's the same thing that if you go and try a distillate, it's probably not going to be as good as if you go try a raw plant form of it, because you're getting a full spectrum when you're actually trying the raw plant, whereas a distillate or an isolate tends to be just that isolated or distilled chemical. So in this case, an isolate is exactly that. It is the pure isolated form of CBD. There are no other cannabinoids, there are no plant waxes or lipids or anything in it It is a pure form of THC. The last one is one that I wasn't really super educated on until recently, and that's broad spectrum oil. So broad spectrum oil is the same thing as full spectrum oil, except full spectrum can have at times up to 0.3% THC in it. So at 0.3% THC, that's not enough to actually induce any kind of an intoxicating effects, but there are still trace amounts of THC in a full spectrum extract, so if you were to be drug tested and you were taking full spectrum CBD oil, you could potentially fail a drug test because of that small trace amount of THC. So broad spectrum is the exact same thing as full spectrum, except they actually extract that 0.3% THC. So broad spectrum is full spectrum minus the actual THC. What that realistically means is you could more than likely actually take a broad spectrum extract or tincture and you could still pass a drug test. So that's kind of a way to consume CBD while not having to consume the THC. But if you're like me, you like both, I go to full spectrum most of the time. You get the best of both worlds. So the next thing we're going to cover is the different forms or the different ways that CBD can actually be consumed. I would say obviously the two most popular are probably smoking or vaping. I would say that's probably the two most common forms of any kind of cannabinoid being consumed. And followed right behind that is edibles. So that's gummies or whatever different edible form of CBD that can be taken. Followed right behind that is probably tinctures. I really personally like tinctures because it's a really easy way to dose a perfect dose of CBD. At the very end, I'm going to cover the most easily dosable and the hardest to dose forms. But the last thing I do want to cover is topicals, because topicals are huge for people who have things like muscle soreness or aches. And they all have their different uses. I think capsules is also in there. I don't know if I included capsules, but capsules is definitely like the most medicinal form. I guess we'll actually cover, like I said, the most easily dosable and the hardest to dose. So the hardest dosing form is smoking. It's really hard when you're smoking anything to correctly actually dose yourself accordingly, especially when you're still kind of feeling out your tolerance and finding your tolerance. It's the least medical form, which is probably why it tends to be the least easily dosable. So in terms of the easiest to dose, I would probably say that goes to gummies, either gummies or capsules. I think tinctures personally are pretty easy to dose because I've been using them for a while. It might be slightly overwhelming to someone who is like just learning about tinctures or hasn't actually used tinctures before to get your dose right. So for me, I would personally say tinctures, but for someone that's newer, I would probably say edibles or capsules are the easiest form. So that leads me into how we should actually be choosing the CBD we consume. It's really important to do your research and be aware of what you're putting into your body, and that definitely applies to CBD. So CBD, you make sure the companies actually have COAs. That's the number one thing. That's certificates of analysis, and I would also try to know where they actually get their hemp source from. Understand where they get their hemp from and make sure that they actually have an analysis of what you're consuming, or else that's a big red flag right off the start. The second thing I would say is look for the most reasonable dosage for the most reasonable price. If you're looking at gummies that are charging, $5 for a 5 milligram dose, that's not reasonable. You are being sold snake oil. If you're looking at gummies that are $5 for a 20 or 50 milligram dose, that's more of a reasonable price. So just make sure there's a fine line between being a good company that has all of their cards on the table, all of their analysis, all of their stuff right out in the open, and having a reasonable price for a reasonable dose. And then the last thing is probably just make sure a company actually has good customer service, if they have any at all. It seems like a lot of the companies you see in stores probably don't have any customer service because they're just being sold in mass, and there's really no hearts or there's nothing being put into the brand. It's just being shoved on a shelf, and you're buying it because you see the word CBD and don't understand it. I personally tend to go towards companies like Leaf Remedies. So Leaf Remedies offers a bunch of different forms. Some of the ones I actually mentioned, they don't actually offer any smokable forms, so they are all gummies, capsules, topicals, tinctures, and exactly like I just said, they offer all their COAs. They're very transparent about their hemp sources, and they're really reasonably priced. That's the biggest thing, is finding a company that has a reasonable price for a reasonable dose is next to impossible in the CBD world, because people are looking to just turn a quick buck. They're not actually looking to give you a quality product. So Leaf Remedies, they sent over a bunch of stuff, and they literally said, if you don't like it, don't mention us, don't review it, you can just have it. Just don't mention it if you don't like it. Take the product, if you like it, say something about it. If you like it, review it, mention it. So that's exactly what I did. I figured I would actually take this time to a little bit further break down CBD as a whole as well. I feel like these educational videos are something I kind of miss doing, just like breaking down cannabis science and helping you guys understand, / helping myself understand more. Like, I actually learned quite a bit, especially about like the broad spectrum stuff, just doing research for this video. So that's all I really do have for this episode, guys. Like I said, make sure to go over and check Leaf Remedies out. I do believe there is a code StrainCentral that gets you a percentage off your order, so make sure to use that if you do go check them out. I definitely hope every single one of you is having a wonderful day. If you're having a rough one, just remember that there's always a better day over the horizon. We have rough days, all of us. Some of us have rough weeks, rough years, even rough decades, but as long as we keep pushing through and get out the other side stronger, we live another day and we're better for it. So I love y'all. Stay positive, stay medicated. Peace, friends.